Okay, two very interesting presentations from the front end stuff. We're now intentionally moving forward to that, oh flipping it, I've got an NEC project to manage stage. So quick show of hands, how many people have had, oh right, I'm now the NEC project manager, I better get set up. Put your hands up if you've been in that situation. Is that all? That's a surprise. You're all far too senior people getting other. How many people have been responsible for people setting up projects as an NEC project manager? Only a few. Interesting. Have we got all the commercials here rather than the project management bit? I don't know. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. The challenge here was to say, let's focus on what you need to do to get set up. Back up. Oops, that's not good. Let's go down. Firstly, this is Barry. This is me. Move on. We'll do it slightly differently, and we're going to see how this works. The first thing I should say, I'm all very good at sharing lessons and lessons learned. Okay, it's one of my favourite things about NEC. Top lesson, if you're going to go sailing and you're not good at sailing, get one of those band things behind your glasses. Okay.
Otherwise you look like somebody out the Blues Brothers.
Otherwise you look like somebody out the Blues Brothers. I've had all sorts of rubbish for the last week at work. You know, you wouldn't believe how much grief I've had. So, NEC is a hugely well-structured contract. Okay, it does 1 to 9, and we're going to be very boring and do 1 to 9. But we'll start at 0. We'll start at what my contracts man said to me when I first joined the contracts department for a couple of years, 20 years ago. What's the top rules about contracts? Read the contract, and read the contract. Okay? And it's so flipping obvious, but you get in there, you start, you've got a whole new team of people, but the first thing is to give them the document, give them the time to work out what the hell you've contracted to do. Quite often Barry and I get to review sets of works information, which is where the problems are, as we all know. And the works information is yay big, it's not very well structured, it's all over the place, and you end up having a bit of work to do, don't you, Barry?
Yeah, occasionally.
Just occasionally. So get your people in to read the contract. Clause 17, 18 is ambiguities and inconsistencies. Get your people in reviewing, finding those ambiguities and inconsistencies at the start, before we get into the cut and thrust of the work. Of course, we're not going to get them all, but put the effort in first. Anybody here ever had NEC training? Put your hands up. If it's not everybody, there's something really wrong. Rekha, surely you must have had some NEC training. Have you not? I'm shocked. The problem we find is that we go and give training to clients, and we give training to clients also for NEC. We're lucky enough to give training through NEC. That 4-day course that's been mentioned, Project Manager Accreditation, is very good. But then clients say, right, we've done training, forget that. And then they get on with a real job, with new people, new ideas, new understanding of how that schedule of cost components work, for example. It's really, really worth taking time out to get the people in the room together, the people you're going to work with tomorrow on your NEC project. Don't ever forget that, because that is hugely valuable. Partnering has sort of come and gone in the industry. I think, you know, we used to go on the raft building, didn't we, and the workshops and the practical stuff on every job. Is that still happening? Yes or no? Not as much as it was a few years ago, but as part of a partnering get to know each other session, it really is worth investing in some more training.
How many people here actually have joint workshops at the beginning of the contract between the employer's team and the contractor's team?
Okay, keep your hand up if you have another one halfway through your 4-year project, when all the people have turned over, and nobody, every year, brilliant, annually. Okay, get it in the works information, say we're going to do this annually. It's a tiny, tiny percentage of your project cost. It's microscopic, but it's worth the investment. I'm biased because I do NEC training, but it's worth doing.
I think it's interesting that when you do those first, often it's just the contract's been awarded, you're just about to launch off on this contract. So you come in, you start talking about the contract, and it's almost like light bulbs come on with people. They suddenly realise the things they haven't thought about, the things they should have done. You know, how is the schedule of cost components going to work? You know, it all comes very late in the day in terms of starting the project. So, you know, really challenging.
Lastly, on the real the naught stuff, is do it together. Because there's a new guy called a contractor and a new guy called a project manager and a new person called the supervisor. And they've all got to set up systems for their own internal business. And 90% of the time, you're doing the same stuff with the same data. Best example is the contractor's sort of quality manager. So why isn't he setting up the same system as the supervisor, near as damn it? And yet we go off and do our separate things. Do it together. The whole NEC, as you know, is a series of processes. Project manager to contractor, contractor to project manager. You've all got to do it, so set it up to work together.
And I think there's a thing as well with the NEC that it often gets unfair criticism because we actually haven't, it's not the contract itself that fails, but we've actually failed to prepare ourselves and organise ourselves properly, looking at the process and the systems, getting the right people. That is where the failures occur on the contract. It isn't the contract itself, but we've failed to prepare ourselves properly for entering into that new contract.
Okay, moving swiftly along to 1. What clause am I talking about? 13 point something. Every communication shall be capable of being read, copied, recorded. You could use one of these, but you're probably not going to. How many people out there are now using one of these as your day-to-day way of working with NEC? One of the in-the-cloud contract management systems? Show of hands. Not enough. I'm not biased. There are some people here who are biased. They're outside trying to flog them to you. But they are hugely good, and the cost as a proportion of your project is getting smaller than it was a year ago. It is crazy. Please find attached form that I've filled in Word. It's only slightly moved forward from that picture on my screen at the moment. It's archaic. We shouldn't be doing that. We should be moving forward. Number of times I'll ask you, have you bothered to confirm under clause 13.2 the address for receiving communications under your contract, or are you still happy with contractor's head office, which is what's stated in the contract data? How many people bothered sort of formalising that, or are you happy with what it is? Any idea? Do you do that? A few, 1 or 2, not enough. Number of times we go into contracts and find that there's God knows how many million things, emails, papers, letters pinging around. Nobody's bothered to confirm where these documents are supposed to be going. It's the most simple thing, but set it up under number 1. Oh, there's more for 1. Sorry, I couldn't get it on one slide. I like that bit. Project manager, the role, is hugely busy. Barry will tell me because I'm not quite sad enough, but how many actions are there a project manager? There's 70, 80 or something throughout the contract, is that about right? Yeah. Roughly. I have got a spreadsheet list of them somewhere. You can't do it on your own. You're going to have to delegate, or at least you're going to have to get support to be able to make these decisions as you go through the job. This is one of the very first things the project manager goes, this is all obvious, and I can see things, yeah, of course it is. But it's just useful, I think, to reflect on these things that really need to be done to get the job started. I grew up in a situation in an old head office where the senior dams man sat in the in the glass room in the corner, and he had to make all the decisions about the department. I'm getting old, I am a bit old now, I know this is grey hair and stuff. Things have moved on, but you do have to get set up to be able to respond within the timescales.
Just out of interest, how many people here have had difficulties with delegation on contracts? Whether it hasn't actually been set up, or it's been misunderstood, or... Yeah, there's quite a few people there, isn't there?
One of the oddities also is that clause 14.2 tells you project manager and supervisor has got to delegate everything, or can delegate anything, sorry. The contract is perversely silent on who the contractor is. Okay, so a load of people weighed in as the contractor. If you're lucky, they might be 1 of 4 or 5 key people in Contract Part 2, but who is really supposed to be answering those responses? I think every Contract Part 2 should be pre-filled in by the employer to say contractor's representative. One of the items should be very clearly the person who is supposed to be representing the contractor. Simple thing to do, write it in Contract Data Part 2. And once you get on site, be very clear, set up, who am I going to be exchanging communications with? Of course, if you use one of these in the cloud wonderful software systems, that's defined very precisely, because unless that person has some authority somewhere, he won't be able to press the button to send the communication. What do you think that is in the context of 1+ on this slide? Any ideas? It's a slightly over-the-top risk reduction meeting. Okay? So, project manager's #1 job, set up the risk register. He's in charge. Have a look at what's in the contract data, put it in, get it started. Project manager's job is to lead on an ECC project. Lead it, set it up, get it in the diary. When am I going to have my routine risk reduction meetings? A lot of the project setup is about, I'm about to say diarising, what a horrible word, but it's about getting stuff in the diary. We will meet routinely once every couple of weeks, week, depending on the state of the project. Get something in the system. Don't wait for the problems to happen. Get the risk reduction. We all know it's key to NEC. Get it set up and start it from the front.
And again, how many people feel they use the risk reduction meetings, early warnings properly on their contracts?
Right, talk to these people over the break, please, because there's not enough of you putting your hand up.
But that's the essential thing. When you look at, if you turn this around, it's what I call back to the future. If you look at contracts, because we tend to look at setting up the projects, but it's also useful if you look at the end of the project, what do you need to achieve to close out your project in terms of, the key thing is going to be change, basically, especially on option C contracts. Either you manage to agree to defined costs, have you managed to sort out the compensation events that are going on? And that's the key thing. If you look at that actually a key finding, if you go to the National Audit Office, and auditors will tell you one of the key things why projects fail is because we failed to communicate. And communication, obviously, is effectively about good information. So project managers and contractors can make informed decisions. So if we don't communicate with each other, if we don't use the early warnings process, we're missing out on a big
missing out what we could do
of really making the contracts work.
I'll move on to design. The requirements for design are going to be littered through your works information. Hopefully there will be one clear statement, 21.1 probably, or is it 2? Sorry. What exactly is the contractor required to design? There'll be a list of particulars for contractor submission, I hope, if anybody knew what they were doing when they wrote the works information. Bit of a pitch here. How many people have read the NEC's guidance booklet on how to write decent works information? Again, possibly not enough. Have a look at it, it's very good. So, get the design sorted, but also the contractor is supposed to be showing his design submissions in his programme, so let's get them scheduled out. Let's pull them out of the works info, make sure we know what they are, and to make sure that we're happy that he's going to be able to submit parts of the design that can be accepted sequentially and properly. Get it sorted out from the outset.
And I think it's also good to build on what Ian was saying about the contract design onto various options, where of course when you look at the contract, it's very simple. There's hardly anything in there. So there's an essential process there in terms of the works information. And again, what you find now is that you can either have something very simple where somebody's actually outlined the design sanctioning process, acceptance process in a couple of pages, or like one example recently, which has had 100 pages in terms of the design management plan, and in there you couldn't find anything about timescales to do anything. So it is something. Are we actually overcomplicating some of these things in terms of what we're doing?
I think so.
You've got to build on it, but you need to focus in on.
The important thing is what we're talking about here is think about that from the start. Another one that came to me recently, I hadn't realised it. It came to me through an adjudication, was that whilst the contract specifically says contractor submits particulars of the design as stated in the works information, it doesn't have the same direct links in works information when it comes to design of equipment. Instead, it just says the contractor submits design of equipment when the project manager asks for it. So it's a little bit more nebulous, but as a project manager, if you can see that we're going to need to see some of this design of equipment, temporary works, then if it's not in the works information already, then put it in the works information. Tell the guy, I want to see this stuff. In this case, we had an issue with the requirement for method statements, which is, yes, obviously required under CDM, but it wasn't stated clearly in the contract. That's not a very good logo. I couldn't come up with that one. That's the best I could come for subcontracting. It's not very good, is it really? It's not the right answer. Sorry. Subcontractor management. There's nothing in the contract let's be positive. The contract is very explicit about each individual subcontractor, but unless you write something in the works information, there's no concept of having an overall plan for subcontracting. But the contractor needs one. The project manager ought to have one, so let's get one in place. A moving, developing phase for the plan for subcontracting on a project. It's just good, sensible project management.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing as well, is identifying, in your works information, what are the essential plans you want from the contractor? Don't write 1,000 pages of works information with stuff scattered all over the place. Have something that's really concise that you can actually manage, a list of those real key management plans that you need.
Okay, 3, management, time. Trying to get away with programs on the back of a fag packet. That's the habit to be crushed. We still see it. The program is a lot more than just a bar chart. It's got backup, it's got narrative, it's got resources in theory. How many people here have seen a project go totally pear-shaped because nobody ever got an accepted program in place? Oh! Blimey.
When's going to be busy?
Blimey. And yet we still don't do it. We still listen to our lawyers who won't let us ask for a program at tender because that's a bit too scary. We'll have one after award. Can't be right. Any decent sized project should have a program developed, understood, agreed as part of the contract data part 2. None of this, can we have one within a couple of weeks? Because we might not have anything else to do that couple of weeks, which is what we tend to do. So get one in place. If it isn't in the CD2, contract data part 2, then put whatever effort it takes to get one going. If you need to go up a couple of levels in both organisations, do it. Get the grown-ups talking to each other and say, come on, let's get a decent program in place. Because otherwise, NEC projects go pear-shaped. We know that, but we don't do enough about it.
So coming back to in terms of the program, how many people here just play ping pong, which is just do what the contract says? Every month we submit a program for acceptance. How many people play ping pong?
And how many people do what I'm saying here we should do, which is set up that monthly meeting, once a month at least, routine meeting, a couple of days before the program has to be submitted. Let's talk it through, see where we are. So when it gets submitted through, Ben's been saying this for 10 years, but we still don't do it. So get the meeting, get the first one in place, get the routine meeting set up and get the right people there to make that happen.
I think the thing is, building on the NEC, it really is something, when you look at the contract, you can take a very simplistic view and say, as a project manager, it's very simple, isn't it? Clause 10.1, act as stated, that's all you've got to do. Just follow the contract. No more, no less. Don't go off piece, you have to do exactly what the contract asks you to do, as Steve was identifying. But what is your working practice? That's the interesting thing to me. Yeah. It's right what the contract says, but the contract only goes so far. And it's interesting, obviously, this afternoon there's going to be some sessions about behaviour and how you work together. But what are you going to do? Like with the programme, what are you going to do every day? What are you going to do every week? What are you going to do every month in terms of managing that? Because we now seem to have lots of people who kind of buried away in offices. They never go out on site and see what's happening. And, again, when I was training, a commercial manager said to me, it's not a crime to go a budget and over programme, but it's a crime to not to know why. So we had one project, and our structure went effectively from £10 million to £20 million. Nobody could explain what had happened because we had this light touch. And again, that's just building on what Ian was saying. Light touch fills me with dread because, especially if you're going on the cost-based contracts, you've got to play your role with it. You can't just expect the contractor to go off and do it all. And it's not about trust, it's about actually working together to help manage those risks within the programme. As John was saying as well, the risks, yeah, but what are those risks? And do we understand those risks that are put into the price to start with? That's often the common area where we have some issues.
This slide here, last picture there, was taken from one of those more modern, more trendy, collaborative planning sessions, which I've never been involved in. We all work in big organisations. A very small proportion of our people know how to do this, and yet it works. Get people actually sitting down routinely. Where the hell are we? Where can we find some gaps? Where can we find the opportunities in the programme? Good practice, but it's hidden and it's out in different corners of our organisations. So get the programme in place, get routine meetings in the diary. 4, this is where I started, watching slump tests as a civil engineer. It wasn't a lot of fun, I must admit. But if it's a test that's got to be done, because it's written in the Appendix 5 to the specification, which is Part 4 of the Works Information Section 4, Appendix 5, Get it up front because someone's got to do it. So someone's got to translate all these requirements into a testing plan. Who does that? Well, guess what? The contractor's quality manager is doing it over here and the supervisor's doing the same thing over there. Get them together. Let's get a sensible plan, schedule of tests that one's doing, how they're going to get reported, recorded, and so on. It's not rocket science, but it needs some investment of your time at the start of the project. Not all defects are like this one, but they still need managing. So get the defect system notification in place. Simple spreadsheet. Nowhere in the contract does it talk about a defects list apart from under the defect certificate. But there's not much point in starting one at the end. We've got to start one at the beginning. What is this defects list? Let's get it in place. Let's get it managed. Guess what's coming next? Not difficult. DOSH, Section 5. QS is slightly more interested perhaps. Section 5 money, get the systems in place. Simplistically, any job is going to be different. Your payment assessment, your payment certificate is going to be different for every job because it's different main options, different secondary options, who knows what. Get it sorted, get it in place. If it's an option C contract, there's going to be lots of little bit of money all over the place. We've heard about it with the schedule of cost components this morning. My favourite line in training is it toilets or toilet paper? Where are we going to pay for these various different bits and pieces? So get it understood. The contractor, if he's on an option C contract and he hasn't got a decent contract cost management system, you've gone wrong already. You might as well go home and start again. But if he has, you as an employer's project manager have got to understand it. Does your contract require the contractor to give you training on the contractor's cost management system? Yes or no? Probably not. Bloody good idea. Sorry, good idea. Get it in place. If your cost people have got to understand where every penny is going on a contractor's system, he's got to have the same level of access and the same level of understanding as the site agent and the contractor's financial people looking after that project, I suggest.
How many people here operate what I call day one implementation of actually, effectively having an audit of the contractor's costs from day one? Yeah, a few?
A few.
Who does it periodically, maybe every quarter or every 6 months? Or how many people do it towards the end of the job only?
They wouldn't admit to it, Barry, let's face it. Not here, not here.
But it is important, that actually that's the thing, because that is the way that you can nip problems in the bud rather than leaving it right to the end, because with things like disallowed cost, it can work both ways. There is no timescale for that.
Yeah.
So actually working from that to day one, coming back to a contractor after 3.5 years and telling him you're going to disallow X millions of pounds isn't a good thing for relationships when you're trying to get the job finished.
It's good for getting case law on the NEC, but that's all it's good for. 20.4. One of, I think, 2 clauses in the ECC that specifically requires the parties to talk to each other. One before we ask for loads of different conversation quotations in 62 something. 20.4 monthly forecast of outturn cost. This is on an option C, D, E, F contract. Monthly forecast of cost. The contractor submits it having talked it through with you. He can't talk it through with you unless you've planned to meet. Get it in the diary. Once a month, understand the systems, have that discussion coming through. Forecast of defined cost on target cost contract. This poor man spent how many months digging out the mess of a job where they hadn't done that from the start?
Oh, about 2.5 years.
He's never been the same. Audit. Audit. As Barry's already hinted at, you've got to get the audit in place. No matter how much you trust anybody, if you're looking after, particularly if you're looking after my money, if you're doing anything in the public sector, or looking after your shareholders' money anyway, you've got to have an appropriate level of audit in place for a target cost contract.
Well paid, Richard.
What's that?
Well, the thing is your wallet. Look at that.
It's okay, it's all crap, don't worry. National Trust card, camping account, there's not much cash in it. So you've got to get the audit, but you've got to get that in place from day naught. And recognise, we mentioned a very strong presentation, good presentation from Ian this morning. NEC, a lot of people, clients, I think you'd agree, are choosing NEC because it's trendy. Because other procurement directors are having a go. They haven't got a chuffing clue what it entails sometimes. They need to be handheld understand what resources they're going to need to do it properly and look after their money properly. And the audit's no good there bottom right. It's got to be up there top left when you first start the job. How are we going to run the audit? How much audit? Who by when? 6, who likes change? Anybody like change? You do, well, you can make some money out of it. Okay, NEC's got 5 pages on change. The only photo I could come up with is that one. I like that one. That's the only thing that likes change. Okay, nobody else likes change, apart from those that make some money out of it. The NEC is all about change. 5 pages out of 18 in the main core clauses are all about change. So, first off, understand it. Secondly, at the very start, get the big boys in the room to agree we are going to manage change on this project. We are going to put the resources in place to make that happen. And again, another meeting. We've got a program meeting, we've got a 20.1 cost meeting, compensation event meeting. Once a fortnight, once a month, whatever. Flex as necessary, but we've got to be talking about compensation events because it won't work unless they're agreed before they come through the door. That's my... Well, it can work, but it's much better that way if we can make it work that way.
And again, how many people here actually play the kind of table tennis ping pong with compensation acts, just centering between different floors with the contract? How many actually sit down together? How many have got an integrated team to look at change? Few, honestly. Few.
Again, not enough. From the start, this is what makes NEC projects work or not work. No matter what option, change is what kills projects. Sorry, the reds in the room. It's the best I could come up with for title. So sorry, I'm sorry. So the supervisor's got a couple of bits and bobs regarding marking and title for plant materials off-site. Relatively small thing, but better work out what he's got to do sooner rather than later at the start of the job. Getting there, Barry. We're getting there. These people want to go further for a coffee, don't they? That's all right. 8. We know it happens, okay? Which is why one of the least well understood bits, and probably the least properly used bits, is all about insurance under contracts. We tend to sort of muddle through with Section 8 and hope it'll be all right, despite the fact we have some mega projects sometimes that really need special insurance and proper advice from people, not me, people that know about insurance. We might not end up with that sort of fire, but we need to get things in place. So project manager, start of a job, should be saying, at the very, very least, making sure we've got those policies in place and that the contract requires a certificate from the policy provider to say that that insurance policy is in place, both from the contractor and from the employer. Fairly low key, should be one little thing, done, dusted, but don't forget it. And then guess what? Put a date in your diary for maybe a year's time, because we better make sure it's still in place in a year's time. 9. We don't really plan for termination, do we? I hope. That's the best I could do for the termination. Can't plan for it, but sure as hell learn from it. I've got one little mini article paper through some of the issues that came about through an adjudication termination. Can't go into those calls because it's top secret, but it's a bit of a shame. So from all that stuff, see, some of you have been scribbling down, some of you have been sort of looking there at me thinking, yeah, I know all that, it's obvious. But we need, logically, a simple checklist. Just a way, there's nothing new in this, it's just a way of focusing and saying, right, new project, what have I got to do? So you need a checklist. We have such a checklist, and if it's of any use to anybody, we'll probably fire it out at the end of the session. You will add to it, you will disagree, you will think there are some other bits and pieces. I started off with a nice, simple 2-page checklist. Then I gave it to Barry. And it's 4 pages now with far too many bits and pieces. So maybe just highlight what I think are important. But that's no good. Just getting it set up is fine. But you also need to do one other simple thing. I'm really impressed with the thought of this 1-page project report or something was mentioned in the stuff. So I'm keen to see what that looks like. I hope it includes this. Health check. Routinely check how your project is going. And don't keep that in-house on the team. That's got to go to your boss. And maybe to his boss's boss, because that's what management's all about. So, health check, get it in plan, and plot the trends. Just like my school, my 14-year-old school sends me a report every year. And it says, the grade that my lovely son is at in each of the subjects. Great. It gives me the aspirational grade. That's the X20 stuff, you know, KPI stuff. But I have to go back to my last report and the one before that to see whether he's making any progress. So I had a whinge with the head teacher and say, can we have some sort of simple colour coding, you know, how's he going? Why can't they do that? Just like that, this data is no use unless you plot the trends of it. So firstly, how many days since the last accepted programme? That's all obviously if that's on your system. But if it's not put on a bit of paper to the top level and above, it's not going to get noticed. Trend. How many days since we last updated the risk register? Simple data that you can pull out from your system. Number of early warnings notified. Are we actually doing this early warning stuff? Are we talking to each other? Yes or no? Number of early warnings live on that risk register. We'll be filtering out the ones that we don't like, I hope. Sorry, don't like, sorry, the ones that are done and dusted with. Got that wrong. If we're under option C, then we better sure as hell be forecasting as a trend that top right corner where we think we're going to end up at. And I don't know why I haven't got a completion date on here as well, but whatever. We need to know where that forecast is going, the one that we're talking about every month, because we've got a meeting for 20.4 discussions. Number and value of compensation events notified, blatantly obvious. Number of value implemented. Anybody been on the train today? What does it say as you get off the train? Come on, talk to me. Mind the gap. So there's no good having any one of those two numbers, you've got to have the two, and if those numbers are going like that, you've got to do something about it. You're the manager, you're looking after the money, get the resources in, get people in a meeting, get it sorted. Simple. That's the health check. What we have too often is the ambulance team. That's Barry on his last job trying to sort the mess out. So get stuff in place, monitor it, report routinely, push it up and be brave and be honest about it to the next tier of management. That's all we have for you. Thank you very much.